"Grandpa, Mom put something in your tea this morning." The words hit me like a physical blow. I was sitting in my kitchen, feeling that familiar fog creeping in after my morning Earl Grey, when my 8-year-old grandson Tommy burst out from behind the staircase where he'd been hiding. The teacup slipped from my hands and shattered against the hardwood floor, porcelain fragments scattering like my thoughts had been doing for weeks now. Tommy hadn't spoken a full sentence in 3 months, not since his parents' divorce, not since he came to live with me here on the farm. But now his small voice was crystal clear, cutting through the morning silence like a warning shot. "Tommy," I managed, my tongue thick and clumsy. "Son, what did you say?" Drop a comment below if you're watching from somewhere you feel safe. Trust me, you're not alone in knowing that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we need to fear most. His dark eyes were wide, serious beyond his 8 years. "Tinboot. I saw her, Grandpa. She put white powder from a bottle into your cup when you were reading the paper. She did it real quiet, but I was watching from the stairs." And that's when I realized my 8-year-old grandson might be the only thing standing between me and something terrible. I knelt on the kitchen floor, Tommy beside me, both of us staring at the shattered remains of my morning routine. 3 weeks of increasing confusion suddenly snapped into focus like adjusting a rifle scope. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, always so helpful lately, always insisting on making my tea, always asking about my medications with that concerned tilt of her head. "She does it every morning when you read the paper," Tommy whispered, his small finger pointing to white residue clinging to the largest piece of porcelain. "I've been watching because something felt wrong. I'd been a medic in Vietnam, then a high school biology teacher for 35 years. I knew the signs of confusion, of age-related decline, but this felt different. This felt deliberate. The farm around us was worth $2 million. 200 acres of prime Iowa farmland that developers had been circling like vultures ever since Martha passed 2 years ago. Sarah worked in real estate. She knew exactly what this property was worth. I had less than a week before the competency hearing that could change everything. In the Army, we called this friendly fire, I told Tommy as we examined the teacup fragments together, when the danger comes from your own side. Tommy's eyes lit up with something I hadn't seen in months. Purpose. He disappeared upstairs and returned with a composition notebook, the kind they use in 3rd grade. His small hands shook slightly as he opened it. "I wrote it down," he said quietly. "Every time, every day. The weird stuff." My blood ran cold as I read his careful 8-year-old handwriting. "Tuesday, Mom comes early. Comes. Makes Grandpa tea. Grandpa falls asleep in chair. Mom looks through his papers. Wednesday, Grandpa tries to drive to store. Gets confused. Comes back. Mom says he shouldn't drive anymore. Thursday morning, white powder and tea again. Grandpa's hands shake more after. 3 weeks of observations that painted a picture no child should ever have to see. We had 96 hours to prove I wasn't losing my mind. I was being robbed of it. "Dad, you look confused again. Are you taking your vitamins?" Sarah's voice carried that practiced concern she'd perfected over the past month. She stood in my kitchen doorway with my son Michael behind her, both of them wearing expressions of worried family members dealing with a declining patriarch. I watched her hands as she moved toward the tea kettle. Manicured nails, real estate agent's smile. The same hands that had been slowly poisoning me for weeks. "Maybe we should talk about getting you some help, Dad," Michael said, not quite meeting my eyes. My own son. "Sarah's been researching some lovely assisted living facilities." Tommy sat at the kitchen table, coloring in silence, but I caught his quick glance toward Sarah's purse on the counter. We were both hunters now, both gathering intelligence. "I've always taken care of myself," I said carefully, testing my words for slurring. The morning's dose was wearing off, leaving me clearer than I'd been in weeks. Sarah's smile never wavered as she poured hot water over a tea bag. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it? Taking care of yourself when you can't remember if you've taken your pills?" Watching Sarah pour my tea with that caring smile was like watching a snake offer water to a dying man. After they left, the silence in the house felt different. Not peaceful, but loaded with possibility. For the first time in weeks, My mind was clear enough to think strategically, to plan instead of just react. I walked the property with Tommy as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the cornfields gold and amber. 200 acres of rolling farmland that my father had built from nothing, that I'd expanded during my teaching years, that should have been Tommy's inheritance someday. The oak tree his great-grandmother had planted was turning autumn colors, its massive branches reaching toward the sky like a promise to future generations. Martha and I had carved our initials in its bark 43 years ago, and somewhere in those weathered scars was the story of our life together. "Tell me about Grandma Martha," Tommy said as we walked between the corn rows, his small hand in mine. "She was the strongest person I ever knew," I said, stopping to pick up an ear of corn that had fallen from the combine. "When your dad was little, maybe your age, we had a terrible drought. Corn was dying, bills were piling up, and I thought we might lose the farm." Tommy looked up at me with those serious dark eyes that missed nothing. "What did she do?" "She got a job at the bank in town, worked there during the day while I taught school, then came home and helped with the farming at night. Never complained, never suggested we give up. Just put her head down and did what needed to be done." "Like I did with the notebook?" The comparison caught me off guard, but it was apt. "Yes, exactly like that. She would have been proud of you, Tommy." We reached the edge of the property where the Henderson land met the state road. A small sign read Henderson Farm, Est 1963, and below it, in smaller letters, family owned and operated. "If you go away, where will I live?" Tommy asked, his voice small against the evening wind. I knelt down to his eye level, my hands on his narrow shoulders. "Tommy, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm not going anywhere, not to some facility, not to anywhere that takes me away from you and this land." "But what if the judge?" "Then we fight. We fight with everything we have. This land has been in our family for 60 years. Your great-grandmother planted that oak tree when she was younger than you are now. Some things are worth fighting for." "What if she wins? What if Sarah gets what she wants?" I looked back toward the house, where warm light spilled from the kitchen windows onto the wraparound porch Martha had designed. "Then we'll know we did everything we could to tell the truth. But Tommy, I've learned something important in my 72 years. Truth has a way of coming out, even when people try to bury it." "Is that why you became a teacher? To help people learn the truth?" The question surprised me with its insight. "I became a teacher because I wanted to help kids like you learn to think for themselves, to ask good questions, to never stop wondering about the world. And I learned to watch and listen and write things down. Yes, you did. And now those skills might save us both." As we walked back toward the house, Tommy suddenly stopped. "Grandpa, I'm scared." "Of what, son? What if nobody believes us? What if they think I'm just a weird kid who doesn't talk much? What if Sarah's smarter than we are?" I sat down on the old wooden fence that separated the pasture from the yard, pulling Tommy up beside me. The evening air carried the smell of autumn, dying leaves, harvest dust, and the promise of winter. "Tommy, let me tell you what I learned in Vietnam. The enemy's biggest weapon isn't guns or bombs. It's fear. Fear makes people freeze up, makes them doubt themselves, makes them give up before the fight even starts." "Were you scared in the war?" "Terrified every single day. But I had buddies counting on me, and I couldn't let them down. Just like you and I can't let each other down now. So what do we do with the scared feeling? We use it. Fear can make you more careful, more observant, more determined. The trick is not letting it stop you from doing what's right." Tommy was quiet for a moment, swinging his legs and thinking. "Sarah's scared too, isn't she?" "What makes you say that?" "The way she watches you when you talk, the way she checks her phone all the time, the way she gets mad when things don't go exactly like she planned." Out of the mouths of babes. "You're right. She's scared because she knows what she's doing is wrong, and she's running out of time to make it work." "Good. If she's scared, maybe she'll make mistakes." That night, I made a promise to my grandson that I prayed I could keep. We would fight with everything we had, and we would win. Not because we were stronger or smarter than Sarah, but because we had something she didn't. The absolute certainty that we were fighting for the right thing, and sometimes that's enough. In the Army, we called this reconnaissance. I told Tommy as we set up our makeshift command center in the basement workshop. Know your enemy before you engage. I'd found my old teaching materials, microscope, recording equipment I'd used for student presentations, even a small digital voice recorder. If we were going to war, we needed weapons that would hold up in court. Nobody notices me anyway, Tommy said with the matter-of-fact sadness that broke my heart. I can go places, hear things. We're not just fighting for this farm, Tommy. We're fighting for the truth. The plan was simple. Gather evidence, document everything, record what we could. Iowa was a one-party consent state. If I was part of a conversation, I could record it legally. We were about to turn Tommy's silence into our secret weapon. Tommy found the prescription bottle in Sarah's purse while I distracted her with questions about her latest real estate listings. His small fingers were quick, practiced from months of making himself invisible. Zolpidem, I read from the label he'd photographed with my old digital camera, for sleep disorders, but it's not prescribed to me. Back in the basement, I researched the medication online. Zolpidem, Ambien. In normal doses, it helped with insomnia. In higher doses, especially in elderly patients, it caused confusion, memory loss, and disorientation. It makes you forget things, Tommy asked. In the right dose, it treats insomnia. In the wrong dose, I looked at my grandson's serious face. It makes you look like someone who can't take care of himself. Finding the pills was just the beginning. We needed proof of what she'd done to me. I pretended to drink my tea that evening, letting Sarah see me take a few sips before setting it aside when she wasn't looking. The difference was remarkable. No fog, no confusion, no lost time. My mind stayed sharp and clear for the first time in weeks. "How was your day, Dad?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying that practiced warmth that now made my skin crawl. "Any episodes today? Memory problems?" "Clear as a bell," I replied, watching her face carefully. "Funny how some days are better than others." A flicker of something, annoyance, crossed her features before she smiled again. "That's wonderful. Although the doctor did say the good days might become less frequent as time goes on." "What doctor?" I'd seen Dr. Peterson twice in the past month, both times with Sarah present, both times when I was heavily drugged. Had she been feeding him false information about my condition? While Sarah chatted about her real estate deals, 3 houses closing next week, a big commercial property deal in the works, Tommy slipped away from the dinner table. Through the kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of him near the back porch, holding something small in his hands. 20 minutes later, he was back, his small face serious, as he finished his mashed potatoes without a word. "I overheard a phone conversation," he whispered to me later, as we walked to the barn to check on the horses, our footsteps crunching on the gravel path. "She was talking to someone about money, about closing something by next Friday." The barn was our safe place, filled with the comfortable sounds of horses shifting in their stalls and the sweet smell of hay. I knelt down to Tommy's eye level. "How much money, Tommy?" "She said 2.5 million. She said once you're declared income something, they could close in 30 days. And Grandpa?" His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "She said if the pills weren't working fast enough, there were other ways to speed up the timeline." Incompetent. The word he couldn't quite remember hit me like ice water. In other ways, what did that mean? She wasn't just stealing my mind, she was stealing our future. And if the gradual approach wasn't working fast enough, she might escalate to something more permanent. The farm wasn't just our home. It was a multi-million-dollar prize she'd kill for, and we were running out of time to stop her. "Michael, your wife is drugging me to steal the farm." I'd cornered my son in the barn, away from Sarah's ears and the hidden microphones I was beginning to suspect might be planted throughout my house. The morning light streamed through the old wooden slats, illuminating dust motes that danced like memories in the air. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, denial, anger, and something that looked like guilt. "Dad, that's crazy talk. Sarah loves you. She's been taking care of you." "Taking care of me or taking care of business? What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled out Tommy's notebook, open to the pages of careful observations. "Your son has been documenting systematic poisoning for 3 weeks. He's 8 years old, Michael. 8, and he's been protecting me better than my own adult son. Michael's hands shook slightly as he read Tommy's entries. Mom puts white powder in Grandpa's tea. Grandpa gets sleepy and confused after. Mom looks through Grandpa's papers when he's asleep. His voice cracked on the last entry. When did you stop believing your own father? Michael looked away, focusing on the hay bales stacked in the corner, anywhere but my eyes. You've been confused, Dad, forgetting things. Your driving, your medications, the way you repeat stories. Stories I repeat because I can't remember telling them the first time due to the drugs your wife has been feeding me. That's not... She wouldn't... Wouldn't what? Wouldn't see $2.5 million in development money and figure out a way to get her hands on it? She's a real estate agent, son. She knows exactly what this property is worth. I could see the war playing out across his features. Love for his wife battling against love for his father. Financial pressure wrestling with moral obligation. She said some developers had been calling, but she said you weren't interested in selling. Because I'm not interested in selling. This is Tommy's inheritance. This is our family's legacy. But if I'm declared incompetent, who makes the decisions about my property? His silence was answer enough. Professional help or professional management of my estate? I pressed. That's not fair. Neither is poisoning an old man for his land. But I could see it in his eyes now. The knowledge he'd been pushing down. The suspicions he'd been ignoring because facing them was too hard. The late-night phone calls Sarah took in the other room. The way she'd insisted on handling all my medications. The convenient timing of my episodes whenever important papers needed to be signed. My son knew something was wrong. He just didn't have the courage to stop it. Dad, even if what you're saying is true, what am I supposed to do? She's my wife, Tommy's mother. She's not Tommy's mother, I said quietly. His mother died in that car accident when he was 5. Sarah married you 6 months later. She became his stepmother, and now she's trying to steal his inheritance. The words hung between us like a challenge, like a line drawn in the dirt of the barn floor. I'd lost my son long before I realized I was losing my mind. Dr. Pemato. Peterson's office smelled like antiseptic and old magazines, familiar from 40 years of checkups, vaccinations, and the occasional emergency. But this visit felt different. This time, I was walking in under my own power, alert and clear-headed, without Sarah's helpful presence for the first time in months. Margaret, the receptionist who'd known me since I was still teaching, raised her eyebrows when I walked in alone. Bob, where's Sarah? She's busy today, I said simply. Family business. Dr. Peterson had been my physician for 15 years, ever since old Doc Williams retired. He'd delivered Tommy, treated Martha through her final illness, and guided my family through more medical crises than I cared to remember. If anyone would listen to what I had to say, it would be him. Bob, these accusations are serious, he said after I'd laid out everything. The symptoms, the timeline, Tommy's observations, the prescription bottle we'd found. Are you absolutely sure about this? I'd brought evidence. The tea sample in a small mason jar, Tommy's notebook open to the most damning pages, and the photographs of Sarah's prescription bottle that clearly showed Zolpidem prescribed to someone else entirely. Doc, I've been a medic and a teacher. I know the difference between dementia and drugging. I know what confusion looks like when it's natural versus when it's induced. He studied the evidence with the same methodical attention he'd given my blood pressure readings for years, occasionally making notes in my file. The prescription bottle photos seemed to particularly interest him. The dosages Sarah mentioned to you, he said, referring to his notes from previous appointments when she'd been present. They don't match what's actually prescribed here. She told me you were taking 10 milligrams of Zolpidem nightly for sleep issues, but according to your actual medical records, you've never had a sleep disorder. And the symptoms she described to you? Memory loss, confusion, difficulty concentrating, episodes of disorientation. He looked up from the file. Classic signs of Zolpidem overdose in elderly patients, especially if administered regularly in higher than prescribed doses. So you believe me? Bob, I've known you for 15 years. In all that time, you've never shown signs of paranoid thinking or delusional behavior. Your cognitive tests 6 months ago were completely normal. The sudden onset of these symptoms, combined with their correlation to Sarah's presence, he closed the file and looked at me directly. If you're right, this is a criminal matter. And if I'm wrong? If you're wrong, then you really are experiencing cognitive decline, and your family needs to make decisions about your care. But Bob, the evidence you've brought me suggests systematic poisoning over several weeks. He stood up and moved to his supply cabinet, pulling out several vials and test tubes. I'm going to run a full toxicology screen, blood and urine, and I'll send this tea sample to the lab for independent analysis. How long for results? 48 hours for the preliminary screen, maybe 72 for the complete analysis. Bob, if someone is doing this to you, we'll find out. But you need to understand, if these tests come back positive, I'll be legally obligated to report it to Adult Protective Services and law enforcement. I understand, and you need to be very careful until we have those results. If Sarah realizes you're onto her, she might escalate. As he drew blood and collected samples, I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that someone was finally taking my concerns seriously, terror about what we might find. One more thing, I said as he labeled the vials. Tommy's been having nightmares. He wakes up scared, talking about his mom hurting people. I think he's been carrying this burden alone for too long. I can refer you to a child psychologist who specializes in trauma. Kids who witness domestic abuse, and this is what we're talking about, Bob, elder abuse, often need professional help processing what they've seen. He's been protecting me, Doc. An 8-year-old boy has been trying to save his grandfather's life, and he's been doing it all by himself. Dr. Peterson was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. Children shouldn't have to be the adults in the family, but thank God he was brave enough to speak up. In 48 hours, we'd have scientific proof, if we could stay safe that long. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like we weren't fighting this battle alone. Sarah arrived earlier than usual, her real estate agent smile a little tighter around the edges. She'd brought a new bottle of vitamins, larger pills that rattled differently in their container. The doctor says you need stronger supplements, she explained, shaking 2 large capsules into her palm. Your blood work showed some deficiencies. I hadn't seen any doctor, hadn't had any blood work, but I nodded and accepted the pills, palming them while pretending to swallow with my orange juice. Tommy was already in position behind the kitchen island, my old voice recorder tucked in his small hands. We'd tested it the night before, clear audio from 15 feet away. Dad, I brought stronger vitamins. The doctor says you need them, Sarah repeated for Tommy's benefit, her voice carrying perfectly to our hidden microphone. I don't remember talking to the doctor about new vitamins. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? She was getting bolder, which meant she was getting dangerous. Sarah's phone rang while I pretended to nap in my recliner, my breathing steady and deep like a man heavily sedated. She glanced at me, then stepped into the kitchen for privacy, not knowing that Tommy was crouched behind the couch with our recorder. He's becoming resistant to the current dose, she said quietly, her voice carrying that cold efficiency I was learning to recognize. I may need to increase it. The voice on the other end was male, businesslike, impatient. Whatever it takes, Sarah. We close Friday or lose the deal. The investors are getting nervous about the timeline. I understand the pressure, but if I give him too much too fast, it could kill him. Then we have a whole different set of problems. Better a natural death from medication complications than a competent old man who changes his mind about selling. My blood ran cold. They weren't just talking about incapacitating me. They were discussing my murder as a backup plan. Don't worry, Sarah's voice carried a chilling confidence. By Friday, Bob Henderson won't be making any decisions, one way or another. And the development loan has to close by end of business Friday, Sarah. $2.5 million doesn't wait for family drama. It's handled. I've already talked to the assisted living facility. They have a bed ready for immediate placement. Once the competency hearing is done Wednesday, I'll have full guardianship by Thursday. The papers will be signed Friday morning. And if the hearing doesn't go your way? Sarah was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Let's just say I have contingency plans. Old men with dementia sometimes forget to take their heart medication. Sometimes they take too much. Sometimes they wander off the property and accidents happen. Tommy's small face had gone pale beside the couch. He was hearing his stepmother plan his grandfather's murder, and he was only 8 years old. The boy could be a problem, the man's voice continued. He doesn't talk, but kids see things. Tommy's not a problem. He's been selectively mute since his real mother died. Even if he did try to say something, who would believe a traumatized kid over a grieving widow? 4 days. We had 4 days before she escalated to a dose that might not just confuse me, it might kill me. And if that didn't work, she had other plans that would guarantee my silence forever. The recording device in Tommy's hands captured every word, every casual discussion of murder, every cold calculation about the value of my life versus the value of my land. We weren't just fighting for the farm anymore. We were fighting for survival. I should have been more careful, should have seen the signs. But Sarah had been planning this longer than I'd realized, and she wasn't taking any chances with the timeline. The tea tasted different that morning, slightly bitter despite the honey she'd stirred in. By the time I realized what she'd done, the room was spinning and my words were slurring together like melting wax. "Grandpa!" Tommy's voice sounded far away, distorted. "Grandpa, wake up!" I tried to stand, tried to speak, but my legs wouldn't support me. The last thing I remembered was Tommy's small hands on my shoulders, shaking me, his voice cracking as he called 911. The hospital saved my life, but it also started a countdown I couldn't stop. "We found unusual sedative levels in your blood work," the ER doctor explained as I lay on the narrow hospital bed, IV fluids clearing the fog from my brain. Sarah stood at my bedside, the picture of a concerned daughter-in-law. She'd beaten the ambulance to the hospital somehow. "He's been so confused lately. Maybe he took extra pills by accident?" "Mrs. Henderson, the levels suggest regular ingestion over several weeks. That just proves he can't be trusted with his own medication." Even drugged and disoriented, I had to admire her performance. She was turning my poisoning into proof of my incompetence, using the hospital's own findings against me. The doctor looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the family dynamics he was witnessing. In the corner, Tommy sat silently, our shared secret burning behind his eyes. She was covering her tracks in real time, and we were running out of options. Dr. Peterson's call came while Sarah was at the kitchen table, going through my financial papers with the kind of thoroughness that made my skin crawl. "Bob, someone has been systematically drugging you for weeks." His voice was tight with controlled anger through the phone speaker. "The lab confirms zolpidem in therapeutic doses, administered regularly. And the tea sample, Bob, there's enough sedative in that cup to knock out a horse." Sarah looked up from her paperwork, her real estate agent smile finally faltering. "Doctor, I need you to document everything. Lives depend on it. I've already called Adult Protective Services and the Sheriff's Department. This is attempted elder abuse at minimum." "Now we can prove it, right, Grandpa?" Tommy whispered from beside me. But Sarah had lawyers, and the hearing was tomorrow. We had proof, but we were still racing against time. The family dinner that night was a performance worthy of Broadway, each of us playing roles that had nothing to do with who we really were. Sarah had outdone herself. Pot roast with all the trimmings, fresh rolls from the bakery in town, even flowers from the garden arranged in my late wife's favorite vase. Michael brought wine, expensive stuff he couldn't really afford, his contribution to what felt like a last meal. And Tommy sat quietly at the head of the table where Martha used to sit, coloring in his notebook while our hidden recorder captured everything. I'd made my decision. Tonight, I was going to push her, to see how far she'd go when cornered. Tomorrow was the hearing, and this might be my last chance to get her to reveal herself. "Sarah, someone's been putting drugs in my tea." Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, a piece of perfectly seasoned beef balanced on the tines. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the sudden silence. "Dad, that's crazy talk. Who would do such a thing?" "Someone who benefits from my confusion. Someone who profits from my incapacity." "Bob," Michael interjected, his voice tight with the strain of trying to keep the peace. "Maybe we should talk about... Sometimes confused people need help whether they want it or not." Sarah cut him off, her voice carrying a new edge, sharp as broken glass. She set down her fork with deliberate precision. Sometimes family members have to make hard decisions for people who can't think clearly anymore, even if those decisions involve criminal activity. Criminal activity? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Caring for an aging parent isn't criminal, Bob. Making sure you take your medications isn't criminal. Protecting this family's financial future isn't criminal. What about protecting this family's patriarch? Her eyes flashed. You mean protecting the stubborn old man who's too proud to admit he needs help? The one who's been making increasingly poor decisions about money, about driving, about basic safety? I haven't made any decisions about money. Exactly my point. She leaned forward, her mask slipping just enough to show the calculation beneath. When's the last time you balanced your checkbook, Bob? When's the last time you reviewed your insurance policies? Your will? This farm is worth millions of dollars, and you're letting it sit here while you play gentleman farmer. Tommy's crayon stopped moving across the page. Even at 8, he could feel the tension crackling through the room like electricity before a storm. The farm stays in the family, I said quietly. What family? Sarah's voice rose slightly, her composure finally cracking. A confused old man and a mute kid? Michael and I are your family now. We're the ones making the hard choices while you live in some fantasy world where you're still capable of running a 200-acre operation. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Sarah, maybe what? Maybe we should pretend everything's fine while his mind deteriorates and our future goes up in smoke? Maybe we should wait until he burns the house down or drives into a school bus. You seem awfully eager to take over, I observed. Her laugh was cold as January wind. I have no idea what you're implying, but this kind of paranoid thinking is exactly why tomorrow's hearing is necessary. She reached across the table for the wine bottle, her movements sharp and aggressive. Dr. Peterson has documented your decline. The episodes, the confusion, the medication errors. Tomorrow, a judge is going to rule on your competency based on medical evidence, not on conspiracy theories from a sick old man. What if the medical evidence shows something unexpected? Like what? I looked directly into her eyes, watching for any flicker of guilt or fear. Like systematic poisoning. The wine glass in her hand trembled slightly, just for a second, before her control reasserted itself. Bob, you're talking about attempted murder. Do you really think I'm capable of that? I think desperate people are capable of anything. She set down the wine glass and folded her hands on the table like she was conducting a business meeting. I have done nothing but care for this family since I married your son. I've managed your medications, organized your doctor's appointments, researched care options for when you need more help than we can provide. If that makes me desperate, then yes, I'm desperate to keep this family together. On her words were a confession wrapped in justification, an admission of control disguised as caring. And Tommy's device caught every syllable, every cold calculation, every hint of the truth beneath the performance. The recording would damn her, but I wondered if it would be enough to save us. Michael sat at the table, staring into his wine glass like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. His silence spoke volumes about the choice he'd already made between his wife and his family. Tomorrow, a judge would decide our fate. But tonight, I knew with certainty that Sarah Henderson was capable of anything, including murder, to get what she wanted. And what she wanted was my farm, my freedom, and my life. The competency hearing was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. Tommy and I spent the morning organizing our evidence, medical reports, recordings, photographs, and his heartbreaking notebook of observations. Grandpa, what if they don't believe us? Tommy, truth has a way of being heard, even by those who don't want to listen. He was quiet for a long moment, then looked up at me with those serious 8-year-old eyes. I want to talk to the judge. I want to save you. Are you sure? It's going to be scary. A lot of adults asking questions. I've been scared for weeks, but you taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right, even when you are scared. Tomorrow, a little boy would find his voice to save the only family he had left. The courthouse smelled like old wood and disappointment. Sarah sat at one table with her lawyer, radiating confidence. I sat at another with the court-appointed attorney who'd barely had time to review my case. Judge Martinez was in her 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd seen enough family disputes to know when something smelled wrong. Your Honor, my father-in-law is clearly suffering from progressive dementia, Sarah's lawyer began. The evidence of his decline is well documented. Your Honor, my attorney responded, lab tests show systematic poisoning over 3 weeks. Judge Martinez leaned forward. This is a serious accusation, Mrs. Henderson. Sarah's confident facade began cracking around the edges. The judge looked skeptical until we played the recording. The courtroom fell silent as Sarah's voice filled the room. He's becoming resistant to the current dose. I may need to increase it. Then the male voice. We close Friday or lose the deal. And Sarah again. By Friday, Bob Henderson won't be making any decisions. That's taken out of context. Sarah's composure finally shattered. I was talking about vitamins, legal supplements. Mrs. Henderson, Judge Martinez said quietly, this recording suggests premeditated harm. Sarah's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she pushed him away. This is ridiculous. A confused old man and a traumatized child. Your Honor, my attorney interrupted, we have additional evidence. Sarah's lies were unraveling faster than she could spin new ones. Tommy Henderson, age 8, the bailiff announced, his voice echoing through the high-ceilinged courtroom. My grandson walked to the witness stand with steady steps, though I could see his hands trembling slightly as he passed Sarah's table. She stared at him with the kind of cold intensity that would have terrified most adults, let alone a child. But Tommy kept his eyes focused straight ahead, on the judge who would decide our fate. Judge Martinez had allowed special accommodations. A child psychologist present, simplified language, frequent breaks if needed, and a small booster seat so Tommy could be seen clearly from the gallery. But Tommy didn't need special treatment. He sat up straight, his small hands folded in his lap, and looked directly at Judge Martinez as she explained the importance of telling the truth. Do you understand what it means to tell the truth, Tommy? Yes, ma'am. It means saying what really happened, even if it hurts someone's feelings or gets someone in trouble. The judge smiled slightly. That's exactly right. Can you do that for us today? Yes, ma'am. Sarah's lawyer had objected to allowing an 8-year-old to testify, claiming he was too young to understand the gravity of the situation and too traumatized to be reliable. But as Tommy raised his right hand for the oath, his voice clear and strong, everyone in that courtroom could see they were wrong. This wasn't a confused, traumatized child. This was a little boy who had watched his grandfather being slowly murdered and had found the courage to speak up. Tommy, can you tell us about your living situation? My lawyer asked gently. I live with my grandpa on the farm. I moved there after my real mom died in the car crash when I was 5. My dad married Sarah 6 months later, but I don't talk to her much. Why don't you talk to Sarah much? Tommy was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. She's not mean to me or anything, but she doesn't see me. Not really. I'm just something she has to deal with because I come with my dad. Can you tell us what you observed about your grandfather's health over the past few weeks? Grandpa started getting confused and sleepy after breakfast every day. At first, I thought maybe he was just getting old, but then I noticed it only happened after Sarah made his tea. Tommy's voice gained strength as he continued, the months of silent observation pouring out in careful, precise detail. I started hiding on the stairs where I could see the kitchen. Every morning, Sarah would make Grandpa's tea and put something white in it from a small bottle she kept in her purse. She'd stir it up real good so it disappeared. What happened after your grandfather drank the tea? He'd get sleepy and confused. Sometimes he'd fall asleep in his chair and Sarah would go through his papers. She took pictures of some of them with her phone. When Grandpa woke up, he couldn't remember things good. Sarah's lawyer objected, claiming hearsay, but Judge Martinez overruled him. This was first-hand observation from the only neutral witness to the alleged crime. Tommy, why didn't you tell anyone sooner? The judge asked gently. Tommy looked down at his hands, then back up at her. Nobody listens to me. I stopped talking much after my mom died because sometimes when you talk, people get mad or sad or they leave. But also because Sarah always said I was too young to understand grown-up things. His voice grew stronger, more determined. But I'm not too young to see. I'm not too young to know when something's wrong. And Grandpa was getting sicker every day. What made you decide to tell your grandfather what you had seen? Last Thursday morning, Sarah put a lot more of the white powder in his tea, more than usual, and Grandpa almost fell down when he stood up. His words were all mixed up, and he couldn't remember my name for a few minutes. Tommy's voice cracked slightly. I got scared that if I didn't say something, he might not wake up one day. The courtroom was silent except for the soft scratch of the court reporter's machine. Even Sarah had stopped whispering with her lawyer. I saw my mom put white powder in Grandpa's tea every morning for 3 weeks, Tommy continued, his 8-year-old voice carrying across the courtroom with startling clarity. She did it when she thought nobody was watching, but I was hiding on the stairs, watching everything. He's just a confused child, Sarah burst out, unable to contain herself any longer. You can't believe... But Tommy turned to look at her, his young face set with a determination that silenced the entire courtroom. I'm not confused, he said quietly, but his words carried to every corner of the room. You hurt my grandpa, and I saw everything. I wrote it down in my notebook because I knew someday I might need to tell someone. I knew someday I might need to be brave enough to save him. He turned back to Judge Martinez, tears starting to form in his eyes, but his voice steady. Grandpa taught me that family takes care of family. He took care of me when I was scared and sad and didn't want to talk to anyone. So when he needed someone to take care of him, I had to find my voice. I had to be brave enough to tell the truth. Tommy, Judge Martinez said gently, you did the right thing by speaking up. I know, he replied simply. Grandpa taught me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always right. In that moment, Tommy's voice was the strongest sound in the room, and I knew that whatever happened next, my grandson had found his courage and would never lose it again. Judge Martinez didn't need to deliberate long. Mr. Henderson, this court finds you completely competent and a victim of attempted elder abuse. Mrs. Henderson, you are remanded to county custody pending criminal charges. The gavel's bang echoed through the courtroom as police officers approached Sarah's table. Her real estate agent composure finally collapsed entirely. Michael, she called out to my son as the handcuffs clicked into place. Tell them this is insane. But Michael was staring at his father and son, seeing clearly for the first time in months what had been happening under his nose. Dad, he whispered as Sarah was led away. I didn't know it was this bad. Justice was served, but the hardest work was still ahead. Back at the farm, the three of us sat around the kitchen table, 3 generations of Henderson men trying to figure out how to rebuild trust from the wreckage of betrayal. I knew something was wrong, Michael admitted, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold hours ago. The way she talked about your decline, the way she was always handling your medications, but I couldn't believe she would... You chose to look away when your son needed protection, I said quietly. Tommy looked at his father with those serious eyes. Dad, Grandpa saved me. Why didn't you save him? The question hung in the air like smoke. Michael's face crumpled with guilt and shame. I failed you both. How do I fix this? By believing us when we tell you something's wrong, Tommy said. By not picking sides between right and wrong. Forgiveness, I learned, is different from trust. The legal paperwork took most of the morning. Custody documents ensuring Tommy stayed with me. Restraining orders against Sarah. Medical monitoring to track my recovery from weeks of systematic poisoning. Bob, you have full legal custody, my lawyer explained. Tommy is safe. Dr. Peterson had insisted on daily check-ins for the first week. Complete detox will take another month, but you'll recover fully. The brain is remarkably resilient. This farm stays in the family, I told Tommy as we walked the property that afternoon. The real family. New locks on all the doors. Security cameras covering the approaches to the house. A medical alert system connecting directly to the sheriff's department. Safety felt foreign after weeks of danger, but we were learning to trust again. The pond was mirror still in the early morning light, reflecting the October sky like a sheet of polished silver. Tommy cast his line with the easy confidence of a boy who'd spent countless summer mornings learning the rhythm of reel and rod. He'd been talking more each day since the trial. his silence finally broken by the knowledge that speaking up had saved us both. But it wasn't just chatter. Every word seemed considered, important, like he'd learned the weight that speech could carry. "Grandpa, I'm glad I found my voice. You always had it, son. You just needed the right moment to use it." A fish tugged at his line, and he reeled it in with the kind of focused determination that reminded me of myself at his age. Strong, resilient, ready to fight for what matters. The base was a good size, maybe 2 pounds, its scales catching the morning sun as Tommy held it up proudly. "Should we keep it for lunch? What do you think? Is it big enough to share?" He considered this seriously, the way he approached most decisions now. "I think we should throw it back. Let it grow bigger. Maybe we'll catch it again next year when it's ready." When we released the fish together, watching it disappear into the dark water with a flick of its tail, there was a metaphor there somewhere, about second chances, about letting things go when they weren't ready, about patience and hope. "Will I live with you forever?" The question caught me off guard, though I'd been expecting it for weeks. "As long as you want, Tommy. This is your home, but someday you might want to go to college, or travel, or start a family of your own." "But I'll always come back? This land will always be here for you. That's a promise." Michael had been coming around more often, taking slow steps toward earning back the trust he'd lost. Last Sunday, he'd brought groceries and stayed for dinner, actually listening when Tommy talked about his school projects and his plans for the vegetable garden next spring. Some wounds heal faster than others, but they all heal eventually if you let them. "Grandpa, do you think Sarah ever really loved our family?" The question hung between us like morning mist over the water. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that some people are capable of loving things more than people? That some people see family as assets to be managed rather than relationships to be cherished? I think Sarah loved the idea of what our family could give her, the security, the money, the status. But love, real love, means putting the other person's well-being before your own. And Sarah never learned how to do that. Dad's learning, though, isn't he? Yes, I think he is. We packed up our fishing gear as the sun climbed higher, the promise of a warm autumn day spreading across the farm. The corn had been harvested, the fields lay golden and peaceful, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the sound of Tommy's laughter as he chased our old dog Rex around the barn. Some voices are quiet until they need to save someone they love, but once they find their strength, they never lose it again. The kitchen table was covered with Tommy's homework, math worksheets, a science project about plant growth, and a writing assignment about someone who inspires you. He'd asked me to help with the last one, and I'd been surprised when he said he wanted to write about his grandmother Martha, not about me. "She died when I was little," he explained as he worked on his rough draft. "But you tell me stories about her, and I think she would have been proud that I found my voice to help you." As I write this now, watching Tommy bend over his notebook with the same careful attention he'd given to documenting Sarah's crimes, I'm struck by how much has changed in just 3 months. Sarah is serving 18 months in county jail after pleading guilty to attempted elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy charges. Her real estate license was revoked. The development deal collapsed when news of her arrest hit the local papers, and the farm is safe from predators for now. But the real victory isn't in the legal resolution. It's in the sound of Tommy's voice as he reads his homework out loud, testing the words to see how they sound. It's in the way he asks questions now, instead of just observing silently. It's in the trust that's slowly rebuilding between 3 generations of Henderson men. "Family isn't just blood," I told Tommy as we walked back to the house after fishing, our poles slung over our shoulders and Rex trotting beside us. "It's who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. And sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths," he added, his hand finding mine as we climbed the porch steps. "Dr. Peterson says my recovery is complete. No lingering effects from the weeks of systematic poisoning. My memory is sharp again, my coordination steady, and the fog that had been clouding my thoughts for so long has lifted completely. The legal system worked the way it's supposed to work, when people have the courage to speak up and the evidence to back up their claims. But it almost didn't. If Tommy hadn't found his voice when he did, if he hadn't been brave enough to break his silence, I might not be here to tell this story. If someone you love is acting strange, ask questions. If their behavior doesn't match their words, investigate. If a child is trying to tell you something, even a child who rarely speaks, listen with everything you have. Trust your instincts. Protect the vulnerable. And remember that silence isn't always golden. Sometimes it's a child gathering courage to save the person they love most. The people who matter most aren't always the ones who talk the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who watch quietly from the stairs, taking notes, waiting for the moment when their voice will matter most. Elder abuse is more common than most people want to believe. Financial exploitation, medication tampering, emotional manipulation, these crimes happen in families that look perfectly normal from the outside. They happen to smart, capable people who find themselves vulnerable due to age, illness, or isolation. But here's what I learned. Predators count on silence. They count on family loyalty being stronger than justice. They count on victims being too embarrassed or confused to fight back. And they especially count on children being too scared or too ignored to speak up. Tommy taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. An 8-year-old boy found the strength to save his grandfather's life because he understood something that many adults forget. Sometimes the most important words are the hardest ones to say. Would you have had the courage to speak up like Tommy did? Would you have known what signs to look for? Would you have believed a child's observations over an adult's explanations? Drop your thoughts below, and if this story reminded you why real family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, not protecting harmful people from consequences, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters too. Because in the end, the strongest family bonds aren't built on blood or obligation or financial convenience. They're built on the willingness to stand up and speak the truth, even when, especially when, nobody else wants to hear it. The farm is quiet now, safe. Tommy's laughter echoes across the fields, where 4 generations of Hendersons have lived and loved and protected what matters most. The corn has been harvested, the winter wheat is planted, and next spring we'll work the garden together. An old man and his grandson planning for a future that almost got stolen from us. And somewhere in that laughter, I hear the voice of a little boy who found his courage just when his grandfather needed it most. Trust isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes it's earned by an 8-year-old who refuses to stay silent, when silence could cost everything. Some families are worth fighting for, and sometimes the fight comes from the most unexpected places. This is Bob Henderson signing off from Henderson Farm, where the corn grows tall and the truth still matters. Remember, your voice has power. Use it wisely. Use it bravely. And never, ever let someone convince you that staying quiet is safer than speaking up. Because the people you love are counting on you to be their voice when they can't find their own.